in December. So I take it that some plans are being cooked up as of now. Could be wrong. And therefore, if some plans are being cooked up now, then what is the basis for the $7.5 million? Because this is financial matters, and I don't know about that. There are other people here and on the other side who know more than me, but it's common sense. Yes. When you talk money and what you're going to spend it for, you must know what you're going to spend it for and why, and how it's going to benefit the people. When you're spending your money, you can do what you want with it. When you're spending the nation's money, we ought to be able to say how it's going to. So I think very soon, in spite of what is said here today, or what has been said, the people needs to know what the $7.5 million, because, and I hear about TAMCC and so on, and I won't go into that, but I know some people still come to my office, and I asked the question a few days ago, what do we tell them? And I was told unceremoniously that the people know, but they still come and they ask, are there vouchers for books and uniform? I tell them I can't tell them. Maybe I should send them to the Prime Minister's office, but they need to go somewhere. They have to pay buses to get to school. Is there any help for that? For the indigent? And so on and so on. People are asking these questions, and especially they're talking about supplies, because this, for the past 2 years and over the past year, the budgetary allocation and the use of it for the bushing has been very small. So by the time they buy a little food and pay their bills, they cannot buy a book bag is about $80, could be more to that. There's probably a cheap one. So people must know that independence celebration of $7.5 million is going to benefit them in a great way. So they could say, all right, we could do without the additional school fees that we have to pay in the secondary schools, because I didn't hear anything about that. Or we could do without the book bag, the children will hold their books in their hand. But there are some people who are desperately waiting to see if the present transformation government will transform their lives for a short period and help them with some supplies. I am not saying take the money that is allocated for independence to do that. I am not knocking the allocation. It's just that I find it difficult to support because I have absolutely no information, concrete, a paper to see in my hand. This is the plan. That is my concern there, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the other thing is that it ends in December. That's your supplementary. And therefore, in the December budget, it's very likely, based on what is said in the document, that there might be additional budgeting for January. Usually things are ramped up then, and the early part of February, or maybe the whole of February. These are things that are not clear in my mind, and there might be one or two people in whose mind is not clear. Maybe a lot understand it, but there are some people who are asking, Mr. Speaker. So, these are things that I would like to see, Mr. Speaker, to understand. Mr. Speaker, again I see an allocation of over $10 million to increase the provision for the rehabilitation of Fort George. Now, Fort George is a project I cannot wait to see happen. And I don't have a trumpet to blow, but those who were with me, around me, around the time when that project was being discussed, and so they would know that I fought very hard for that project. And they just need to be asked. Just need to be asked. Because at one time we ran the risk of losing the project, and I asked the people from the World Bank to come down and let me show them. I took them on a tour up in the fort, and I explained to them some of the history. Sometimes you have to go back to history. And in a few days from leaving here, when they were about to withdraw the money or put a hold on it, they sent back a letter to the Ministry of Finance. And the Minister for Finance can ask. And they approved all of this money and more, because they recognized that the cost of living and so on had gone up. So I couldn't just go and ask them to put a $7.5 million dash a figure here or put it there. I had to come up with some tangible things to say that this is where we're going to use it. I can't give you the exact figures, but the persons who deal with figures, they will be able to think it. I would like to see that. But what I don't understand is, again, there's no explanation. What is that $10+ million for? Because we're still in the fiscal year, in the period, we're in the budget. I noticed something that said, work has ramped up, and that justifies the money because we're due to finish in September. Now, if we take September, which is tomorrow, what is it? $10 million that you can spend between now and September. And if we say we are going to, it might be expanded to December because I read it carefully. If it's, will we spend the 10 million? But what is it? Is it cost over, what is it? We still don't know. So to come to this honorable house and bring this document to us and ask us to approve it without knowing exactly what is going to be spent for, I feel it's gross disrespect to us, all of us in this honorable house, because maybe not everyone on the other side will deal with that matter of the fort. And I know I'll get some backlash. People sitting, we weren't doing anything with the project, but history will absolve me. So I really don't care about that. I did what I had to do, and the only reason that the present government got the project is because we fought, we realized we were slow.
Honorable MP, could you just hold? I notice the light of MP for St. Andrews South West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand on the point of explanation and clarity. And to
Is it a point of order?
point of order, please.
Okay.
And I'm saying that because I knew the member came in late when I was providing the explanation for that money. She did in fact arrive late. But I can repeat what I said then for the benefit of the member.
Honorable, your point is that she's deliberating what she has said because she missed your presentation. Is that fundamentally the point you make?
Yeah, because she wasn't there when I was speaking on the matter.
All right.
I explained what the project is.
All right. So thank you.
Right.
All right. Honorable MP for St. Mark.
Mr. Speaker, the MP is my good friend. The MP is my good friend. And but in this, and I respect his knowledge, but Mr. Speaker, I am going by the document presented to me, and I want to apologize for being late, Mr. Speaker. I did have some unforeseen circumstances, so I had to supplement some activities so that I could think. So, Mr. Speaker, but so the point is, even if you increase it to December, you have to give an explanatory note that explains and satisfies this honorable house, which in turn will satisfy the people of Grenada, Carriacou, Petite Martinique. The explanatory note accompanies the line item, what it says, and there's a lot of etc., etc. It has to explain it. Mr. Speaker, another case in point, on the vote 50, Ministry of Health, Wellness and Religious Affairs. I see some monies for equipment. Mr. Speaker, I wish it would have been more, because I know that there are problems in health and there are areas to be serviced in health, and it could have been more. So my issue, I didn't even write the figure. My issue is not the figure at all. But again, it's the same thing. And I am putting the case for transparency, for clarity, so that we know what we're dealing with in this honorable house, and that we serve the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique appropriately with appropriate information. And so, Mr. Speaker, there is no, we can go down. There is no explanation as to what the equipment is, what it is for. and the importance, well, you know, usually you don't have a lot of details of the importance. Sometimes just what it is speaks for itself, but again, it is not there. And so when we see that, when we peruse the document, then we don't have to come here and ask, and we don't have to wait to hear somebody explain it. It should be in the document, and perhaps that is one of the things that we would have to review at some time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is the issue of, and I'm looking at it, to facilitate a 2.5 million. I'm just rounding it off. All this sense and so, not good for me. To facilitate the payment for additional security needs, as well as increase the rate per hour for security contracts for all government workers. Mr. Speaker, I don't think, and based on the explanation I heard from the member from St. David's and Prime Minister, I don't think anybody would be against bringing up the salary of the security people to at least minimum wage. But Mr. Speaker, I still have some questions, because while I'm happy for them, and I don't want this to detract from that, I'm happy for them, I still have some questions. Are these the only government workers that are below the minimum wage? That's my first question. And secondly, I know that the government was doing some consultations island-wide on minimum wage, and I applaud you guys for doing that. It's something that needs to be looked at. But there were consultations, and there was a committee set up to look at it. Was there a report given to the government that could have been shared with us? Because it's of interest to all of us. It shouldn't be a national secret. But was there a report that brought forth the recommendations from those consultations? Is it still in process? And if so, when is it expected to be completed? And if so, then why was one group of government workers singled out? What will happen to the others who are under the minimum wage? And will it be in the next fiscal year, for 2024? Will we hear it when we come to this honorable house for the budget? Was it bargained between the contractors and the government? Was it bargained without a union? These are some of the questions we would like to know. So it's the move in and of itself to increase minimum wage is an excellent move. The process begs some questions, Mr. Speaker. And so I raise this for what it's worth, how the other lower income persons will be dealt with from the government side, but also there are lower income persons who work in the private sector. So that will that be a law? Will it be a national thing? Whatever it is. Mr. Speaker, in terms of the acquisition of assets, I heard the Prime Minister, and I know he promised within 14 days we will get a listing of those things, because quite a lot was said, and I don't have all of the information, but it would be very interesting to see what this acquisition, because what it says is acquisition and what purchase and investments to support government's transformative agenda. So that again leaves us wanting in terms of having an understanding of what it is. Mr. Speaker, I want to make recommendations that we look at the proper procedures for supplementary or budget, and that we itemize what these things are going to be used for, so that we on our side, and maybe some on the other side, perhaps all of that was explained to them, can assimilate the matter properly and be satisfied that the money is being used. I still have not been, I can't say I'm satisfied with what I'm hearing. I know there is need for supplementary, but there is a lot of need for explanation to the funds, the 140 million. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP for St. Mark, constituency of St. Mark. Is it the PM? The light from here. Honorable Prime Minister?
Yes. Mr. Speaker, I refer to Rule 35.7, which allows a member to who has already spoken on the matter, to be heard to offer any explanation of some material part of his speech, which I'm going to now indicate has been misrepresented. Mr. Speaker,
Go ahead.
I heard my distinguished colleague for the constituency of St. Mark stand and say how I, the Prime Minister, say nothing has been done for 50 years. Well, I've been here from the beginning of this debate, and I did not make that statement.
Well, let's get the answer.
I did not make that statement here this morning. That's one. And two, if it's been suggested that I made that statement at the Finance Committee meeting,
He said 25 years.
Let's get the answer.
He said 25.
I also did not make that statement. That's one. And then finally, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps because the member says she doesn't understand some of these finance matters, so perhaps I find that difficult to believe given her experience in government. Mr. Speaker, a supplementary appropriation bill is not for 4 months. It is for the entire year. And therefore, to suggest that this appropriation has been brought to spend money between now and December is patently misleading. And I'll give one example. Last year, Mr. Speaker, when we brought the supplementary appropriation bill, including in that item was $10 million, which the former administration gave to Greener Development Bank so that we could on-lend to contract employees. When we got into the office, that $10 million had already been given to GDB, and GDB had already spent the money. There was no lawful authorization for them to do so. We, knowing that, and because government is a continuum, as part of the supplementary appropriation for 2022, included that item. So to suggest...
Just hold on to the Prime Minister. I'm not sure why the Leader of the Opposition light was on. So just invite him, please, Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this is a point of order. If the member has already spoken,
Yes.
I checked it for about 45 minutes plus.
So you stand on a point of order.
Yes, yes. And therefore we members are here prepared to do their explanation and their response. After some member can in fact get up later, but to interrupt them and to go, so anytime something is said, a member can get up at any given time and interrupt the flow of responses. Mr. Speaker, I have a problem.
Right. And Honorable Leader of the Opposition, you are very correct. Any member cannot just get up. The procedure is that you wait on the Speaker. Right? You get clearance from the Speaker. Let's remember that, please, for everyone, every member of the House. Let me just say to this Honorable House that Section 35, subsection 7 of the standing orders, right, is what gave the Honorable Prime Minister the clearance to stand when he stood. Okay? And it is the Speaker's discretion that's at work here. It is the Speaker's discretion. It's well documented in the standing orders. So you might disagree, or you might hold a different opinion, but the standing orders does allow the Speaker of the House to use his or her discretion. And I'm doing it. Honorable Prime Minister, are you finished?
Well, I will conclude. I was just making the point, Mr. Speaker, because it's been represented otherwise, that a supplementary appropriation is for a budget year. It is not for 4 months left in a calendar year. Right? And I was simply giving the perfect example, and so that we understand. The purpose of an appropriation bill is to get legal authorization to spend the money. Governments, including the former government, has on numerous occasions spent money, had no lawful authorization to spend, and then had to come to seek parliamentary approval to do so. So to stand as a seasoned and experienced member of Parliament and of Cabinet and suggest that an appropriation means you're spending the money between now and December, and so you're concerned about the quantum or however you could spend that in 4 months, it is misleading.
Prime Minister. Now I wait for the next light. All right, I assume no other contribution needs to be made here. Honorable MP for St. Andrew North East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make my contribution to the motion before us this morning. And Mr. Speaker, while I do acknowledge that every administration would face challenges in meeting the yearly expenditure, and the supplemental is an important part of covering the expenditure, the proposed amount, as alluded by my colleague here, of over 140 million raises serious concerns. And I do hear the explanation that this is not just for the 4 months to end this year, but it's for the whole fiscal year, because we are catering for some expenditure that has already gone. But when you really look at it, Mr. Speaker, in reality, over 90% of what is proposed here is to cover for the next 4 months. We can look at the figures presented before us and it will show that. But I'm also asking myself, though I was not there at the time, when the last budget was presented in December, an over $1 billion budget that I heard described as the best budget. How much of this budget was implemented? They may state otherwise, but based on what we can see, it was a very low implementation rate to this point. And I'm saying this to say, because most of the projects that were started by the previous administration, our administration, were placed on hold. Some is still on hold to this day. So there was no implementation there. Amounts have been budgeted for those projects. So if you have budgeted for such projects and they were on hold, money was not spent. It means there is the window of opportunity to reallocate some of these budgetary amount, this budgeted amount, instead of coming here now to ask for or to make a proposal for this amount to be spent. And while we get the impression that we should not question anything, we don't have a right to speak, you're in opposition, sit back and relax and listen and learn, that's the impression given. It must be remembered that we have a responsibility to the general citizenry of this country. And we have the right to ask questions for clarity so the ordinary man and woman can understand what is being presented here. We cannot come here and take it for granted that because we were elected by the majority, we can do and say what we want and it has to be accepted. We, on this side, will not accept that, Mr. Speaker. So I must say that this over $148 million is unprecedented. Never in the history of supplemental budgets you have heard such huge proposed amount. Therefore, we have a right
to ensure that every penny is accounted for in the best interest of our citizens. We received the document, Mr. Speaker, with very little explanatory notes. My colleague mentioned it. We have to know how this government intends to spend our taxpayers' money. The details must accompany the document. We have to peruse it, we have to go through it, so that we can bring further clarity to the House, to the people of this country, the people whom we represent. And I know the $7.5 million budgeted for the upcoming independence, 50th year anniversary of independence have been spoken about. But I must lend my voice here as well, Mr. Speaker. It's 50 years. Of course, we expect a grand jubilee to mark this celebration. We expect that. And we do expect that the amount budgeted for this amount should be much more than what was done in the normal period of the normal celebration. We expect that. But $7.5 million, and the document did indicate that no amount was spent budgeted for in the December budget for the independence celebration. So this here is for the next 4 months, to be spent in the next 4 months. I've heard the member for St. David and our Prime Minister that $2 million will be used for the $50 notes. I note that, Mr. Speaker. But then the $5.5 million, are we to assume that it is to joyride people to and from for the celebration? This is what happens when serious details are not provided. With that kind of budget, Mr. Speaker, I do hope that whatever is being planned to do will have some sustainable benefits for our people. It's 50 years, and we expect that celebration to be grand. However, we cannot forget the current economic crisis that we are operating under. In the face of high unemployment, in the face of many people losing their jobs for whatever reason. One person indicated to me that they were fired based on age. About a few days ago, being 56, a few weeks ago, we increased the retirement age to 65, but they were fired based on it. I'm just making this point to say, Mr. Speaker, that we have people who are losing their jobs. We have people who are unemployed. And there will always be, but there is an increase in the unemployment of our population at this time. How are we catering for the thousands of young people who have just graduated from the different schools, secondary as well as tertiary, and trying to get into the job market? Are we thinking about that within this grand Jubilee celebration? These are my questions here, Mr. Speaker. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, I note the document indicated that there will be a $2.1 million requested here for accelerated work to be done on the Seamoon Cultural Center. And I asked the question at the Finance Committee level. From the time the last budget, the best budget, was read in December, that project has been on hold. So for the past 7 months, it was on hold. How then are we requesting that sum of money when you already budgeted in December for it and the project was on hold? How was that budgeted among spent? Am I to assume it was the $3 million budgeted then was for the redesign that was spoken about? We must ask the questions because we need the information, and not so much us, but the people of this country need clarity, need the information. So, we need to know, Mr. Speaker, about that amount that is proposed for the accelerated work to be done between now and December for the Seaman Cultural Center. And mind you, this project is dear to my heart, and I want to see it completed because a lot of initial work was done to get it to the stage it is at now. So I would like to see the accelerated work done and the completion be done soon. However, it has to be done in the most transparent manner for our citizens. Mr. Speaker, under the Ministry of Social Development, an additional money, sum of money here is requested to hire new staff to complete the recertification process. I have no problem with requesting the additional amount because I believe it is needed. But I believe it should be used to train the current recertification staff and not bring in new staff. You see, Mr. Speaker, the current recertification staff is identifying people, wrongfully so, and they're removed from the list. So the benefits that they receive is taken away from them. So it means something is wrong with the strategy used by that current recertification staff. Because if you can identify
Leader, just hold, Honorable MP, just hold. Leader of Government Business, your light.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the member is misleading.
Honorable MP, are you standing on a point of order?
Yes, I stand on a point of order, Mr.
Yes, yeah. Make it easy for me, please say that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member is misleading the House. The member states that people have been removed from the seed program as a result of the recertification. I want to know from the member where she's getting that information from, and if she has it, please supply to this side of the House the full list of people who have been removed, because it appears that you may have some information that we don't have. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Leader of Government Business. And before you proceed, Honorable MP for St. Andrew Northeast, it's very important that when you speak in Parliament, in spite of parliamentary privileges, that the information that you share here is factual as far as possible. So I now invite the Honorable MP for St. Andrew Northeast to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, if only the member allowed me to continue, I was going to give 2 examples of those who have been removed as a result of the recertification process. And instead of the member questioning me, he should question his staff to get the information. So I was about to identify, Mr. Speaker, an elderly woman with a disabled daughter being removed from the program. They live at Telescope. The information was broadcasted via social media. It was double-checked. That elderly woman came to my house. The line minister responsible subsequently asked for the details. It was presented. So they are aware, Mr. Speaker. It was also well known that a blind man was removed from the program. Whether they say it was an error or not, that person was removed. So people are being removed, their benefits are being removed from them as a result of the recertification process. And it means here that the current staff needs to be properly trained so those mistakes should not reoccur. That is the point I'm making, Mr. Speaker. So we are asking for more efficient spending of our taxpayers' dollars. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to make reference to the additional budgetary amount for the renovation of government buildings and the importance of maintaining those buildings, so eloquently explained by the member for St. David and our Prime Minister. And I actually believe that government buildings have to be properly maintained because we use them. That is why we are sitting comfortably here in this house, because this building has been constructed by this administration, and our former administration, Mr. Speaker, so we can all enjoy. Maintenance of it is important, and yes, the current powers that be has to ensure that it is maintained. That is the role of the government in office of the day. However, it just drew my memory back to the current Prime Minister's residence and the last time I passed there since June 2022, the amount of bushes I saw covering the building. Isn't that part of state buildings as well, Mr. Speaker, that should be maintained? It is always good to come here and sound good. But in reality, our people are paying attention to the contradictions of what is actually happening. So we come here, it sounds good, it is recorded for the Hansard. But the actual reality of what is happening out there is quite different from what is being said here, Mr. Speaker. Our words and actions needs to balance. It needs to match, Mr. Speaker. Before I end, I just want to say that we are not here merely as opposition members, but as guardians of the Grenadian Trust. And we owe it to our constituents to ask questions, to seek clarity, whether they like it or not. We have a responsibility, and it must be done in the interests and benefits of our constituents. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP for St. Andrew Northeast. Is it the light of Honorable MP for St. George Northeast?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. May I proceed?
Please do.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning to give the full support to the Honourable Member for St. Patrick East and Minister of Finance on his motion brought forward. Mr. Speaker, in particular to this motion, I am satisfied that we have done the necessary groundwork, and under the Ministry of Education, Youth, Sports and Culture, if you would allow me, I will give just a snapshot of the figures. So for example, $150,000 is being reallocated to the Department of Sports in particular to compensate for transportation costs. And this transportation cost was as a result mainly with the Windward Island Games, school games, 2023, which Grenada was successful in. Additionally, it is testimony to an increase in sporting activities throughout the length and breadth of the country. We have $2.5 million, Mr. Speaker, being reallocated to, that's largely Right. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I just wanted some clarity on something. So that $2.5 million is going to help cover the tuition costs for, and you heard it announced by Member of Parliament for St. David, the Honorable Prime Minister, what we are going to do with this, it's duly explained in my view, my position. I don't think we need to pretend that it's not. But before I continue, I want to address this specific matter which I have seen this morning in particular. Now, I see the argument against the motion, which I do not understand. The honorable members, Mr. Speaker, through you on the other side, is indicating that they have a problem with the amount of money. They are also indicating that it's not properly explained. But in their responses, when asked just some basic questions, where is the fact to what the point you're bringing forward? So for example, we'll speak to the specifics, Mr. Speaker, through you. The member says that $7.5 million being spent for the Jubilee celebration doesn't give a clear breakdown as to what is being spent for or on. And two members, we heard it this morning, also say that why would you spend all that money now? Subtract the $2 million or $2.5 million or so that is spent for the note, $50 commemorative note. But what's about the $5.5 million? Why are you spending all that money now and unemployment high and people losing work and all these other things? Mr. Speaker, these claims are unsubstantiated. It is not factual, and I guarantee you that even after we leave here, none of the members on the opposition side can go out and prove this officially. So what I am saying is, or suggesting, let us deal with the substance of what we are here to debate and stop all this fairy tale and all this story. We have a situation where we are taking monies and addressing the access to education through the free tuition at TAM-CC and also NULO. If we do, in fact, have an unemployment issue, this is a direct spending by government that is going to help to bolster a young person's ability to get a job. So I am saying, if we are debating, let us debate substance and stop with the fairy tales. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the renovation and the extension program in schools being offered, we are allocating just over $8 million for this. Now, we heard a lot about the renovation of government buildings, and I honestly want to speak to that. Because yes, I heard this morning that yes, the former administration that built the Parliament building, but there was no maintenance program. Absolutely none. Look at the state of it. New building leaking, light flickering, playing tic-tac-toe upstairs here, distracting us here, to our very eyes. I'm saying, if you have vision, and this is not a direct attack to the current members, because Mr. Speaker, in the spirit of truth, what we must do is never fail to assume responsibility. Leaders accept when they were wrong. Nothing was done. This administration is attempting to solve all of these through the various appropriation. The talk about the money being too much and so on, Mr. Speaker, it is clearly explained. Some of it is grant funding that we are putting in just to ensure that we have additional transparency. So it's not monies that we are taking out from other ministries in all instances. It is pretty clear. And let's understand this. It's not the members of parliament that is preparing the appropriation budget. All the members on the opposition side, Mr. Speaker, through you, they are well aware of that, and they know it's the Ministry of Finance. So let's stop pretending as if we sit down and say, put this, put that. That's not how it's done. You all know the practice. You have to gather the data, etc. What we are discussing, because you are part, all of you were part of the Finance Committee meeting. So the same stories we're hearing coming out about the hard economic times and so on, we're in it now. Again, I will ask Mr. Speaker through you. Doesn't mean they will answer. For any one of them this morning to quote any facts that suggest that unemployment has increased, to quote any facts that economic growth has slowed, to quote any facts to support the poor economic situation in the country that they have expressed. I would like them to produce that facts. Because again, what we are dealing with is an appropriation supplementary budget being put forward, which speaks specific sectors and how we are going to reallocate. When we talk, for example, about this acquisition, let's analyze that. It's interesting. I want to see which one of the members is going to attack it. You were giving away countless, and you had opportunities to fix it because, you know, we like to talk about experience and who's grandfather, grandpa, grandchild, whoever it is. We like to talk about all of that. But you had countless opportunities to fix it. You come in and you want to take off our neck now in an appropriation budget to try and fix some of these things? Well, clearly you're not in a real world. Because, Mr. Speaker, the appropriation specifically targets, as I mentioned, specific sectors. It doesn't deal with the whole budget. And it is not just for a temporary period. And the members ought to know this, and they need to stop these fallacies and falsehoods that is just perpetuating. And as I conclude, because I don't think we have much to say, we talk a little too much, time for action. I agree with you. Let's implement. And the implementation rate is going well. What we have to deal with is a backlog of years of unsolved problems from the former administration. That is why this administration is so busy, and we're doing that. We're going to get the job done. You don't worry about that. Work with us and stop the complaining. That's what we need to do. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to address this issue. And we heard the honorable member raise it. This week, Prime Minister, please permit me to raise this issue. In my management meeting, I was told that a 58-year-old or 57-year-old was given a letter through the removal of the 60-plus people on the Imani program as supervisors. She was given that in error. In about 5 hours after I was made aware of that, I saw it on Facebook. And the minister is accused of giving out envelopes of letters, sending people home, and so on. We came to this house and we spoke about the problem that we had with this program. So even if somebody is given something in error, I don't know what is this big hoopla and to pretend that people are firing people. It is a normal process for the government not to engage people over 60 years. And you had people who were 70. And after repeated attempts, one individual only telling them, leave him on the program, leave him on the program in the past. So we have since changed that. So to come out and pretend and put out these falsehoods, riling up, let us debate the substance. None of you have presented any substantive counter-argument to suggest that the allocations are inadequate or not appropriate to the so-called transformation agenda that you refer to, because the one we are talking about, Mr. Speaker, addresses the issue of unemployment. And as I mentioned, the 2.5 million being allocated to TAMCC and ULO will go a long way in ensuring that our young people can begin the process of ensuring that we improve their skills, competence, and ability to get work, not just in Grenada, but beyond our shores. And this is a progressive move, and it should be supported more by members of the opposition. So, Mr. Speaker, With these few words, I rest my case, because we need to understand what we are dealing with here. I think it's pretty much clear. As Prime Minister said, we're going to undertake in 14 days to present the breakdown for the details, not just to here, but I'm certain to the public in particular. And we will see how much it is costing Grenada for bad decisions of the past. Those who come here now and talk as the best scholars, as if they know everything that was wrong and so on. But when you had the countless opportunities to fix it, none of you, Mr. Speaker, through you, attempted to. Whether or not you didn't understand or you just simply did not care, the point is, the fact is, we are now correcting decades of wrong in this country through this appropriation bill. And it should be given some more respect, because the dishonesty is low. We need to understand, Mr. Speaker, lastly, that when these things are being presented, it is not being presented and the opposition don't have a chance to change, etc. We have committee meetings. So there's under this administration, I can only speak of the experience I had. When we sat in the Senate, myself and my colleague here for the Honorable Member for St. John, I cannot recall, it doesn't matter what we raise, whether it was from the questions with oil and gas and all these other things, Mr. Speaker, I cannot recall the government's own appetite, even with the issue with Grenling. They're talking about details, right, with the repurchase. Where's those information? Where's your strength to now produce that? Because I'll tell you the relevance of it. When we talk on one side of our mouths, when we're on a particular side, and give this falsehood an impression that we are withholding information from the public because we're not putting it in the explanatory notes. And then when you are there, you had an opportunity to show us different, because we like to claim the experience. You didn't do it. You expect us to just come and do that in 1, 2, 3 years, just like that off the bat, and you have no example? So let's be real. So, Mr. Speaker, while I digress a little bit in the end here, I just want to say I fully support the motion being put forward by the member from St. Patrick East and the Honorable Finance Minister, and I look forward to its implementation and for us to continue to roll out as we move forward to the upcoming budget and as we move forward to next year, celebrating our Golden Jubilee, 50 years of independence.
Thank you very much, Honorable MP for St. George Northeast. And I'm making another appeal to the MPs on my left, only some of them. There is a constant chattering that is happening, and I want us to be mindful of the house in which we now sit, and the need to sort of give the sort of due respect that is required when we are in this house. I see the light for Honorable MP for St. George.
Much obliged, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the MPs on your left sometimes have to consult. So we don't have any mechanism of consulting. So, and especially when we don't get information, we ought to be talking about what do we do. So I apologize if it disturbed. I apologize.
Because MP, I'm already prepared to ask you. You want to challenge this speaker?
I'm not challenging the speaker. I'm explaining to the speaker why. I apologize, Mr. Speaker. You're not hearing the apology. I'm saying we were not just chattering. We were just consulting on who to speak, what to speak about. We don't have a lot of information. So sometimes we consult, and we don't have many consultants in our, I mean, the gentleman have consultants in the back. My friend was consulting with his consultants earlier. We don't have that privilege. So if you find us consulting sometimes, Mr. Speaker, we don't mean any disrespect. But, you know, Mr. Speaker, I didn't intend to speak. But I felt obligated to making some issues. My good friend, in fact, the son of my good friend, Mr. Redhead, member for North East, made some, well, let me start with that before I go into some of the substantive matters. He is suggesting, first of all, he mentioned dishonesty, Mr. Speaker. That is casting vice portions, and members on the other side. In all of what I've heard, nobody expressed any idea that anybody on the other side was being dishonest. We are engaged in a debate. We are here to represent the thousands that we were elected by, so we will debate. The member said we should sit down and shut up. He didn't put it that way, but that's how I interpret it. You know, just listen and let's get on with the work. He said stop complaining. So, Speaker, I'm making an overarching point. We are debating, we are not complaining. And if we are complaining on behalf of the people who tell us we should complain. So if you have to complain, we will complain. So I'm saying to the member, let us debate respectfully. Let us debate respectfully, because when people outside see us carrying on that way, then they feel it is okay. I see it in court every day. We set standards here. So I want to say to the member, it's a young man I have a lot of respect for. I like him, he knows that. But please, all I have heard from this side is that we need some explanations. Nobody came in here and complained about the amount in it without a context. And we said the reason why is because we were not given detailed explanations. So let's look at one of them, for example. And I'm not trying to take off anybody's neck. I'm just trying, you know, when I used to be on your side, in your party, the buzzwords were transparency and accountability. I hear it so much times, I mean, I could say it in my sleep. That's all we're asking for. Give us some details. So, you referred to the fact that the member here spoke about the $7 million for the independence celebrations. 7.5 billion for the independence celebrations. It says in the margin to mark the Jubilee celebration. That's what it says. And that is unusual. Let us accept that. And we are not saying it is unnecessary, we are saying it is unusual. So when we say to the people we're spending $7.5 million on Jubilee celebrations, when I saw it, it jumped out at me. Because I know what celebrations are normally like. You go in the park, you march, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. But the member for St. David correctly said that this year it is going to be different. And I accept that because it's the 50th anniversary, so it has to be special, and special is always a little more costly. If you're carrying the lady to a special dinner, you're going to spend a little more than if you're going to buy some bakes and saltfish in the side shop. Something special always costs more. What we're asking for is some explanation why we are taking $7.5 million to spend on what is listed here. The only thing we have is Jubilee celebrations. Is that an unreasonable request? I guarantee you if you're on this side, you'll be asking that. I guarantee you that. And don't keep talking, this, you know, in the US there's a new word now about whataboutism. Anytime we criticize, well, what about you? So they call it whataboutism. And I hear it coming over now. Every time we make a criticism, well, what about you? No, we ask, you are the ones in charge. So you, regardless of what we say here, you're going to spend the $7.5 million. We know that. But tell us what is going to be spent on. You know why? Because our success will come better if we are able to work together on those things we agree on. Those things we agree on, we can only know we agree on them if we get the details. So I would like to see the details of the 7.5. Why? Because I have to explain to the people in my constituency why some of them were not on the seed program going forward, but yet we could find $7.5 million. If you, any of you who hang out on the blocks, you will hear people saying that. You can't give me this, you can't give me some material from a house, but you could spend $7.5 million on a Jubilee. It is legitimate. And when you are in opposition, if you get to opposition that you will get to one day, you will hear that. And you will come here and stand up and demand explanations the same way we are demanding it. So don't tell me we're complaining. We are asking the questions that we need responses to. And the other point I want to make is this. A pillar of an economy is confidence. You could have all the money in the world if people don't have confidence that you're running the economy well, it can shake the root of your economy. It is best that you have people on this side drilling you so that you develop the capacity to get that confidence that you believe you're the best in the world and nobody telling you anything. We are doing for you what the system expects us to do, which is inquire. People are losing confidence because you made a lot of promises that some of them are difficult to keep. That is a fact. So let us try to reset. So the $7.5 million, I joined, and the member for St. David did stand and give an explanation. Although in his explanation he said that previous generations have failed us. I disagree. Now he said he didn't say that they did nothing. I'm not arguing about that. But he did say, who is the serving leader, Mr. Speaker? Not anybody on your left.
No, I'm not even sure myself.
Not anybody on your left. They were all fine. Anyway.
MP, I'm not even sure myself. You proceed.
This for doing this one, Mr. Speaker, disturbing me. But in any event, let us proceed. I still hear the murmurs, Mr. Speaker, coming from the right, not the left. Anyway, my good friend will respond to me when he's ready. Mr. Speaker, I also see the acquisition of property. So the $7.5 million, that jumps out, and we all accept it's a lot, and we look forward to a proper explanation. On the issue of the acquisition of property, we have no difficulty if the government is acquiring property for national interest. The hospital and acquiring property for the hospital is good. But I would like us to do two other things in respect to health care. One, let's try to fix what we have now, because the hospital has always been a dream. The hospital reminds me of the airport. It's been a dream since the 1950s, Uncle Gary's, and even revolution came to get it about 50 years after. I believe we should dream, and I'm not saying don't dream. But while we dream of the perfect, let's fix what we have. Let's fix what we have, because sometimes the problem with healthcare is not the building. You go to Cuba, and there are comrades on the other side who've been to Cuba. When you go by the medical, and I see some hospitals, no fancy thing like it, because fancy healthcare costs money. The equipment, the nurses, the staff is important. So I'm saying we support, and I don't, I'm not even complaining about the hospital. I am not complaining about the intention to build a new hospital. I want to say it so that it's on the record. I'm saying that while we dream, we fix what we have. So a lot of this money, the millions, the 7.5, the 60, all of that, some of it I urge you, and again, listen to me as if I'm making recommendations, as if I am on your side. I'm sure in cabinet you disagreed, some of you disagree with each other. When in parliament you do disagree too. Let us fix the healthcare system. And yes, you could say, what about you? Come on, say it. I mean, I expect it. It's not about what about us. Every generation, as I said to the member for St. David, every generation does what it does. Look, the member for St. Andrew South Northeast spoke about this building. Rather than say, yes, you all did a good job, we built the Parliament building, you start talking about some light flickering upstairs. No, give credit where credit is due. A new Parliament building was built by the NMP administration. Bunks the table on that. Some lights flickering and all. I'm sure you have lights flickering in your house too. But you condemn the contractor. My dear brothers and sisters, and again, we are not against the supplemental. We've been in government for years. We've had supplementals, but this is an unusual amount. This is an unusual amount. I sit down when I hear point of order and you...
Honorable Prime Minister, is it a point of order?
Mr. Speaker, a point of order, because I think it's important for me to point it to my friend and also to the MP for St. Andrew Northeast. Because you see, Mr. Speaker, when I come and I say people are patently saying things that are false, the supplementary budget last year, Mr. Speaker, that's on record here. The figure is on record. It was $194 million. So how could we come here and stand and say 1 year later that this supplementary, which is lower, is the highest supplementary in the history of supplementary budgets?
Mr. Speaker, what is the point of order there?
Honorable,
what's the point of order?
Honorable MP, just hold up.
I use the word unusual.
Honorable MP, allow me to deal with it.
What is the point of order, Mr.
Yes, you just take your seat, Honorable MP. Are you finished? Honorable Prime Minister, you're done.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's the point I'm making. You know, my friend is going to stand and say we
did not say it's the largest in history, Mr. Speaker.
Well, I did not say
untrue.
I'm on my feet.
Honorable MP, just hold, Honorable Prime Minister. Just hold, please. Honorable MP for the town of St. George. You know the procedure very well. Right? You know the procedure. You put your light and you wait for me to call. Earlier on, mention was made about order and precedence and examples to set. So why are we just standing up? Allow the Speaker to direct the proceedings in the House, please. Honorable Prime Minister, are you finished?
Well, Mr. Speaker, since there was some shouting, I want to make sure that I'm recorded accurately. I did not say that the member for the town of St. George said it was the... I did not say that it was a member of the town of St. George who said it was the highest supplementary budget in the history of supplementary. I said it was the member for St. Andrew Northeast. You can complain about that, but don't say I said something I did not say. And that's the point I've been making this morning. And the point I'm making is, one, the reference to unusual suggests that this is some extraordinary, out of the ordinary. It is not. The supplementary budget last year was even larger. Right. Two, and that's the point that I think the MP for St. George Northeast is making. That people come here.
All right.
No, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to finish, please, if I beg your indulgence. Right? And that's why I was making the point, Mr. Speaker, that an appropriation is for a year. And
Honorable PM, I don't want you to go back on what you just said. The point is that what you presented before is being misrepresented. That's what you said?
I'm saying two things. It is being misrepresented, and statements are being made that are patently false.
Thank you. Your light isn't on. I'm appealing again to the honorable members that you make the factual statements in the House. Let us all try to get our facts straight so there is less back and forth. Right? If we stand up and we say what is factual and true, there would honestly be less back and forth among the members. Honorable MP for the town of St. George, please continue.
Your Honor, I will continue, but I must address the point made. I said it was unusual. Now, he uses what somebody else said earlier to make a point of order against me and have me sit down. And that, Mr. Speaker, is what I object to. Unusual. It's a word I use. You can have two governments doing unusual things. It doesn't mean that I never said the first time in history, because I know I've been here for years. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't know There seems to be a new thing now, Mr. Speaker, and you will have to guide us maybe in committee meeting, that anybody is allowed to jump up and say anything at any time to take me off my stride. Mr. Speaker, point of order is to address something I did and I said. I've been here for many, many years, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable MP, I don't need a lecture on a point of order.
Well, I'm not giving you a lecture.
Just please go ahead and make your substantive points.
I'm not lecturing anybody, Mr. Speaker. I'm not lecturing you. I'm saying in my address that I have begun and was interrupted on a point of order, I am adjusting the point of order. There is no point of order, and I would have liked an apology for that, but I know it won't be forthcoming. So I will continue. Mr. Speaker, I do hope that there's equity when that rule, that new rule, is to be used by other members. In any event, let me go on, Mr. Speaker. I won't be long because I do have a funeral to attend, and that is very important. Mr. Speaker, the issue of the River Road project, I am happy. I am happy that I'm seeing some light at the end of the bridge, because the two bridges need to be done. I asked the question in the committee meeting, and I will ask it here again. Do we have sufficient money to complete it? I see 2 million. And the answer I got was no. The 2 million is not going to be enough. So I expect that there will be budgetary allocations in the new budget come November or December that will complete it. Why I focus on that? There were some heavy rains about a month or two ago where the river did not overflow in the areas where there was a wall, the wall. But the area where the wall has not been completed overflowed and went into the road in Upper River Road, Lower River Road, sorry. So, Mr. Speaker, I do hope that the $2 million gets us to the bridges, as the member said. I know during the campaign I heard someone who was campaigning on the side of the other party indicate that we should rip down the wall and get because blocking the view of the people in River Road. It was actually said, it's on record. It's there. If somebody wants to dig it, I can get it. The point I'm making is it is now clear that the wall is there for safety and it has saved lives. I hope and I am happy that the promise made in the election to rip down the wall was not fulfilled. But that's the true of other promises too, that promise was not fulfilled, so the people, and some other promises, so that the people have the wall to protect themselves. Mr. Speaker, but I urge that we move with haste. The rainy season next year should not catch us with the road complete. In addition to the road needs to be completed. Mr. Speaker, all in all, I believe that this supplementary budget addresses some of the major concerns, but it lacks in some areas. And we made our position known in committee. I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, that in areas where you have the large expenditures as indicated, the people need an explanation. Secondly, the issue of, and my friend raised it, is the people at the Ministry of Finance who doing it, not you all. I'm not sure if he's trying to transfer blame to the Ministry of Finance people or technicians. But you are the policymakers indicating how much money you want for each allocation. Don't try to blame other people. So I'm simply saying that the attempt to not accept responsibility, the attempt to develop what we call what about you? Meaning we did this and we did that. And I know it's going to come back in the budget, which is a few months away, so we'll be adequately prepared. I heard all kinds of things about what you all did. If you spend, you know, when I was in government before, and we spent nearly the first 3 years while I was there blaming the previous government on until the previous government come back, because that's all we spend the time doing. If you want to spend all your years blaming the NMP for every problem in Grenada, go right ahead. But the fact is, you now have to govern. You now have to fulfill the promises, but you also have to subject yourself to scrutiny that we have an obligation to do in a parliamentary system as brought down to us by the British and carried on over the years. I agree with my friend from St. David. There are things we need to change, but in order to change the things that we need to change, we have to learn to work together and accept criticism where criticism is due. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to say much more because we passed 12 o'clock already, and I know there are others who want to speak. Mr. Speaker, I rest my case. And I rest my case, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable MP for Tongue of St. George. Just to remind members that we still on the first of the motions. It's gone past midday, and of course we have the bills to deal with as well. So try to be as concise. The two lights are on, so I'm a little bit confused. Okay. All right. I now notice the light of Honorable MP for St. Andrew Southeast.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I note your words. Please be concise. We wasted a lot of time in this house this morning. And I would love to be concise. I'm normally concise, but thanks for the reminder, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this morning I rise on the subject of the supplementary estimate 2023. And Mr. Speaker, I wish to make some comments beginning with the issue, and I'm a bit concerned, Mr. Speaker, of a trend that I noted this morning that continues. I'm not sure, Mr. Speaker, if we all understand. People on this side of this house did not just land here. People in constituencies had confidence in us. They elected us because they expected us to come here to have a voice, to have a say, to question, and to speak on their behalf. Mr. Speaker, I am concerned that there seems to be an attitude of sit down, shut up. It's not your right to speak. You're asking too much. You're complaining too much. Mr. Speaker, we came here elected by people to represent them. And so, Mr. Speaker, if the people who elected us have concerns, that's our job. That's our responsibility. And we are not going to abdicate that responsibility, Mr. Speaker. We are going to continue to represent the people who elected us. So, Mr. Speaker, if you ask us to sit, we're going to sit. If you ask us to speak, we are going to speak. But, Mr. Speaker, be guaranteed that we are going to represent the people of our various constituencies while we obey the rules of this house. I just pray, Mr. Speaker, that we don't change the rules of the game as we go along. Mr. Speaker, I've heard repeated over and over that we question the amount of this budget. And my colleagues are accurate. It is unusual. And it's not just that it's unusual, Mr. Speaker. It lacks sufficient information that we can make any informed decision. So if you ask me right now, Mr. Speaker, am I going to support $7 million for independence celebration? I'll say, no, I can't. Because what is there is not sufficient information for me to make a decision. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is not unreasonable for us to be asking the questions that we are asking because we truly don't have the necessary information. And Mr. Speaker, I just want to use an example this morning. Pardon me, the prints are pretty small and I'm not even sure I can read it. And it's not zooming. We probably have maintenance issues here too. Mr. Speaker, I want to refer to the Ministry of education, youth sports, and all the other areas. I just want to give an example of what we're talking about and to make the point that we are not making any unusual request. And I want to refer, Mr. Speaker, to the item that speaks about renovation and extension program for schools. I'm giving a practical example. Mr. Speaker, if you ask me if I can support this, I'll say to you, definitely I can. Right? Because I go to the far end of this document and it asks, is this a one-off expenditure? If no, what are the future cost implications? And this is the explanation given. Maintenance work on schools will be an ongoing expenditure as regular upkeep is necessary to ensure the functioning and safety of educational facilities. The specific quantity of future cost is difficult to allocate, as it will depend on the nature and severity of the maintenance job required. However, the ministry is committed to better planning for 2024 fiscal year, taking into account the maintenance needs identified, etc., etc. So, Mr. Speaker, I come over, so basically saying we like a little bit of planning and, you know, we couldn't come up with this figure prior. And then I move over, Mr. Speaker, I'm looking for justification to decide if I can support. Is that unreasonable? No, it's not. So I move over now to the other column that says, was the provision unforeseen at the time of the budget preparation? If yes, explain why. So the headings are quite accurate. So of course I read. It says yes, it was unforeseen. Some of the contracts for maintenance work in certain schools were previously signed off through the Ministry of Infrastructure, and the allocation were made accordingly. However, it goes on to explain why. It says, however, at the beginning of this fiscal cycle, the Ministry of Education was informed that these maintenance jobs must be completed under the purview of education. Unfortunately, the relocation of funds did not occur. So, Mr. Speaker, this is telling me we couldn't do this because the Ministry of Infrastructure did not reallocate the funds. So I say, okay, fine, let's get the funds now if you didn't do it before. And Mr. Speaker, that is what we are talking about, simple explanation of what is to be done. It's not an unreasonable request. Mr. Speaker, if you go, and I'm making this point, did I start off by saying a perfect example of explanation? But there is no consistency in the document. This is one item. But I expect to see that level of consistency throughout the document. That's the point I'm making. So when you tell me you're going to spend $7 million on independence, I expect to see an explanation like this with a breakdown that would help me to make a decision as to whether I support it. So of course, yes, this is an example of what we expect to see throughout the document. Mr. Speaker, $7 million independence celebration is quite a hefty amount. And if anybody on this side does not ask for what, I'll be very surprised. Mr. Speaker, when we asked this question, and again, we were promised. So I expected to come here this morning to be able to make a decision whether I support or not support $7 million for celebration of independence. Mr. Speaker, we were told that we would be given a breakdown. Of course, a date was not given, but I thought quite obviously it would be for the debate. But until today, Mr. Speaker, we have nothing. And consistently, my colleagues have been asking, can we have more information? Mr. Speaker, when asked about $7 million for independence celebration, I remember clearly. The response was, and it was given again this morning, of that $7 million, $2 million is allocated for the printing of a note, right? Mr. Speaker, I don't recall, and I must say it this way because at least I have a standing a point of order. I don't recall, I don't want to be disturbed, so I'm going to choose my words very carefully. I don't recall, Mr. Speaker, at any time that we were given an explanation of the remainder of the $7 million. I don't recall hearing this. What I heard is $2 million for the note. And as soon as I heard it, Mr. Speaker, the immediate thing that came to my mind was, okay, $2 million for the note. How are we going to benefit in a practical way? And the minister went on, and he explained we are going to sell the notes. So I sat back because I thought, oh, that's a real good idea, selling the notes, Mr. Speaker. But now I'm expecting to hear some kind of cost-benefit analysis presented to say that $7 million will be spent, or $2 million will be spent rather, and we expect to collect $15 million or $25 million. That was the next thing that I was expecting to hear. But it appears, Mr. Speaker, that we've taken a decision to spend the $2 million, not even being sure who is going to buy those notes. So we are hoping that people in the diaspora would buy and people in Grenada. Mr. Speaker, what we fail to understand is that people here need a $50 note right now to go to spend to buy school supplies for their children to go back to school. So, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about memorabilia, Mr. Speaker, that is for who have and will take a $50 and put it away, treasure it, and keep it for future remembrance, Mr. Speaker, or future admiration. Mr. Speaker, let us get real and let us ensure that the information, as I gave the example, Mr. Speaker, is provided so it can help us to make decisions. Mr. Speaker, that being said, on the item of school repair and school infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, I'll just say that I fully support this in preparation for the reopening of school, but it juggles my memory a bit, and it pricks my memory a bit, because there were a number of projects at critical stages 1 year ago, Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to give an example, the Grenada Christian Academy. Some projects that were at the point of negotiating contracts, some projects that were at the point where contracts were done. In the case of Grenada Christian Academy, the design was finished, approved, everything. And we were hoping that we would swiftly move into finalizing a contract for this project, Mr. Speaker. While I note this, the explanation, why I note that I support this, I am also saying that we need to know, we need to hear some critical projects, the status of those projects, where we are going.
Just hold. We'll switch chairs briefly. Step out.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in the chair.
I'll just give notice, Madam Deputy Speaker. That's normally very difficult to remember, but I'll try, Madam Deputy Speaker. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I make the point that we need to pursue and we need to move swiftly as it relates to many of these projects. I've always said this, and $8.2 million is not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money. But I'm saying that while this is allocated, and I support, we need to ensure that we move swiftly to follow up on the many projects, the many initiatives, and I gave an example or two that we need to pursue and we need to move quickly on in that regard. Mr. Speaker, I also want to use this opportunity this morning to address the issue of, let me get the actual title, that speaks to support for students, TAMCC, T.A. Marshall Community College. That's actually the title of it. You can find that on page 4. Mr. Speaker, again, there is a Madam Deputy Speaker again. There's quite detail there that helps me to say, yes, I support this, Mr. Speaker. But again, Mr. Speaker, as I read the explanation, what comes to my mind is a little bit of doubt as to what exactly is it saying, and then I listened to the MP for St. David's, and then I got a little more confused because he literally said to us this morning that everybody can go to TAMCC, you do not have to pay tuition. Everybody can go to NULO, you don't have to pay tuition to go there. But Mr. Speaker, it's not just that, there's also a very confusing message. And it really doesn't matter if I'm confused, Mr. Speaker, about the message. What matters, Mr. Speaker, is the people we represent, they must not be confused. So I'm listening to Minister A giving a thorough explanation of this and explains that the government is going to support students by paying tuition, free tuition. And then I listen to Minister B comes along, and Minister B says free education. You don't have to pay anything to go to TAMCC. You don't have to pay anything to go to NULO. Everybody can just go. Mr. Speaker, let us not set people up. Madam Deputy Speaker, let us not set people up. Let us be very clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, of what the message is, and to have a single message that does not bust the bubble of people who lift their hope and are getting ready to go to TAMCC. Now they are finding out. Mr. Speaker, in this Madam Deputy Speaker, I told you this is going to be very challenging for me. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm doing my very best. Madam Deputy Speaker, the explanatory note says, the appropriation of 2.5 million is designated for the free tuition program aimed at covering tuition fee for eligible students pursuing post-secondary or tertiary education. This allocation specifically targets two groups of students. Those transitioning from Form 5 of public secondary school to year 1 of TAMCC, or NULO and student currently in year 2 of TAMCC. So now I'm confused. Is it anybody, everybody who wants to go can go? Or is it as this explanatory note says, which is all that I can work with? Two categories of students. Is it that the previous allocation caters for the everybody, but this one narrows down to two categories of people? Madam Deputy Speaker, these are the questions that we have that are justified. We can only explain this to somebody who pops up in our constituency office if we are provided with the necessary information. So I'm reading this, and if I take it at face value, it does not line up. It does not match up with everything that I've heard before. And that's all we are asking, more detail, more information, so that we can say, yes, I support. No, I cannot support, and this is why. We are a responsible team, Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker. But information is what is going to help us to support the government's presentation or not to support. And so, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to refer further to this particular item. Madam Deputy Speaker, tuition is not all that is needed for a student to go to TAMCC in terms of the cost. Let us not present it in that way. As I said, I've heard some people explain it. And I've heard some persons giving a totally different impression. It's paid, just go. And so people are coming saying that they are going, not understanding, and I'll give you a practical example. One person who wants to do plumbing at NULO, when they were told that there is a cost, I said to them, no, there's no cost, just go. Because that was honestly my first understanding when I heard a minister of government explain the program. It was when I got this document, Madam Deputy Speaker, Mr. Speaker. It was when I got this supplementary document
Continue, Honorable MP.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying I listened to a minister of government, and I advised a person from my constituency, a constituent, based on what I heard. As a matter of fact, now that I'm saying this, I remember sitting in the presence of the Honorable Kate Lewis, MP for St. Andrew Northeast, and a young lady came. I did not even remember this until now that I'm saying it. She came in her presence, someone from her constituency, and she said, I went to New Low, and the government said that we don't have to pay, and this is what New Low said to me. And I remember clearly the response, because what was presented in some cases gave that impression. So there are persons who are preparing to go, there are persons who are journeying to New Low with that perception. And so I'm saying the message must be singular. The message, Mr. Speaker, must be so clear. Up to yesterday or day before was it, I heard a minister speaking on the subject. Don't make me feel as if I'm crazy. 2 days ago, I heard a minister of government speaking publicly, saying it's free, education is free. Mr. Speaker, if that person, and we better explain these things to people, people trip up for many different reasons. Mr. Speaker, if that person is going to do a plumbing course at New Low, admission fee $265. 1 year tuition fee for skills, $750. CVQ fees, $450. Tools, $650. Mr. Speaker, when you add this up, the government would be paying $810. The trainee would be paying $1,305. That's the point, Mr. Speaker. Now, note two things I want to say. Number one, that $810 as a part contribution to that child, Mr. Speaker, in the previous administration, and don't make this sound as if Jesus Christ just arrived. Mr. Speaker, no. Because you check back the records and you're going to see how many students had 100% scholarship to go to New Low. 100% covered for children who could not afford it. Mr. Speaker, all of this cost that I mentioned, the total cost was paid by the government of Grenada. Because this child who wants to do plumbing, Mr. Speaker, even if the government was to provide the tuition fee, he still cannot go, Mr. Speaker, because he cannot come up with $1,300. That's the point. That is the point. And that does not include meals, it does not include transportation, it does not include any cost that has to do with living for persons who stay on campus. Mr. Speaker, I am saying that this is probably a perfect example of misleading in some cases. And note my words, in some cases, but because I've heard it explained pretty well by some persons, and I've also heard something totally different from others. Let us make sure, and you know we have a way, Mr. Speaker, that when people on this side speak, we focus on the messenger. Mr. Speaker, for Christ's sake, let us focus on the message. You know what is the message this morning? The message is review the message. Review the message. Put out something quickly that explains to people what we are paying is tuition fee, and that you would have a responsibility to pay anything else but tuition. So forget the messenger this morning. Forget the messenger. The message is there are people who are indeed confused over this initiative. And let everyone speak the same language so that no one is confused. Mr. Speaker, I'm also making this point, that because they are students, I got invitation to several graduations, and I'm keeping on the point of NULO here. Several invitations. Persons who had no alternative options to pursue studies at NULO. Their parents were not in a position to come up with the extra 1,000 plus. They had no other means, and the government would have funded full cost. And I believe everybody in this House is aware of that, Mr. Speaker. I am saying no problem. Let us budget for tuition for everybody. As a matter of fact, CBI funds far exceeded the amount that you expected in the first half of the year. So we have the funds. As a matter of fact, based on the information I've been provided with, I am free to say this morning, Mr. Speaker, I'm comfortable saying, let's take 2 million from the 7 million for independence and put it towards this program so that it will not just cover tuition, but it would cover full costs for those persons who will be denied an opportunity to go if they don't have the rest of the funds. Mr. Speaker, I'm appealing this morning, ignore the messenger and just take the message for what it's worth. Mr. Speaker, I want to say this. If a student in my constituency gets their tuition costs covered, I am extremely happy for them. As a matter of fact, as I said, the money is available, no problem, do it for everybody. But I'm saying this morning that there are needy students, needy families in 15 constituencies represented in this House who need more than just tuition assistance. Let us support them. Let us support them. While I'm on this, Mr. Speaker, I heard this morning very nice message from the Minister of Education announcing that school vouchers are available. Of course, my colleague would have missed it because I was just quickly going through something and it popped up. So if you were not quickly going through something and it popped up, you may have missed it. And that must have been this morning because only last night I was in a community and parents were nervous. And I know we probably would say, okay, well, why they can't help themselves? I know that's normally our traditional response to this. But Mr. Speaker, let us not trivialize certain things. I heard it mentioned this morning, and I'm happy I'm happy that my colleague, MP for St. Andrews Northeast, raised the point of the SEED program. And persons in need, Mr. Speaker. Persons who lost their jobs. Now we're extending the retirement age, and this is something I don't quite get. We're extending the retirement age. We could debate whether it's 62, 65. The point is we're going upwards. But while we are in Parliament debating and discussing this and pushing to extend the age, we are sending home people who turn 60. Mr. Speaker, that's a little bit confusing to me. And I'm not talking just of public servants. I am talking about ordinary people with a simple contract, poor people. The same people who probably doesn't even have a bread to send their children to school. We're saying, okay, because you turned 60 yesterday, you must go home today. Mr. Speaker, it really does not sound right. And not carefully, Mr. Speaker, I am not referring to the Ministry of Youth here. Let me just make this point. In case you're wondering where I'm referring to, I am referring to the staff at the Grand Bacolet Rehabilitation Center. So please, every comment doesn't require a a response. As I say, forget the messenger. Note the message. And the message is that the government has taken a policy position which we sat right here and supported, extending the age for retirement. And I'm saying if you have a cook, Mr. Speaker, if you have a cleaner, Mr. Speaker, if you have a security officer, Mr. Speaker, who just turned 60, only person in the House employed, Mr. Speaker, I am just simply saying I don't understand how they can all be fired with very little notice because they just turned 60. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. This is not an accountant in the Ministry of Finance. This is not a chief policy advisor to the government. These are ordinary people, Mr. Speaker, cooks and cleaners and etc. Mr. Speaker, but you know what is sad? It's not just the concern that was raised by my colleague of people losing their jobs. I mean, which Grenadian doesn't know that many people have been losing their jobs? Which Grenadian doesn't know that? Which Grenadian does not know that people have been removed from the list, the seed list? I mean, this is known. Minister. Right? So I would think that a comment like that is made, and maybe there might be some sort of attempt, as you said, the deputy minister did say she was going to look into it, right? Yeah. I can understand that. I can understand, who are you talking about? What are you talking about? I could understand all that. But Mr. Speaker, I cannot understand how the reference made by the parliamentary representative for St. Andrew Northeast can be referred to as fairy tale stories. That I don't understand. What this tells me, Mr. Speaker, it's either that we just don't want to hear, or it's just not important. The attitude with which it was spoken of. As I said, I don't know. Which Grenadian don't know? I listened to a town hall meeting. A lady was almost in tears. I assume the Prime Minister was there and other members of government were there. I saw the video circulating. She was almost in tears talking about 2 senior citizens, very old people, who were removed from the list. So it's not just my colleague, it's not just me, other people.